and Engagement Committee open. I have apologies from Councillor Bunting, Councillor McPherson. Also, I note apologies from Her Worship the Mayor, Paula Southgate, Deputy Mayor Taylor, Councillors Naidu Rolfe, Councillor Forsyth and Mungai Hill. Are there any further apologies that we are aware of? I will move that those apologies be sustained. Seconded Deputy Chair, Councillor Wilson, who is on Zoom. All those in favour, those to the contrary will say no. It is carried. We now move to confirm the agenda.
But the rest of you, but I can't hear anything.
I heard Martin say something about the meeting opening. That was it.
That was it. I said it.
We're just going to... What I've done is I've just... Can you hear now? I've just moved the apologies.
Yes, I can hear.
And I'm now moving to confirm, and the Deputy Chair seconded that and was carried. I now move to confirm the agenda, and the agenda is as per on the sheet of paper in front of you with regard to two major items: parking restrictions and traffic bylaw changes to be led by Robin Denton, and temporary road closures. So I move that we confirm the agenda. Seconded Deputy Chair Wilson. All those to the contrary, those in favour, those to the contrary, carried. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Right. We now move to item 4, which I'm going to first of all ask Robin Denton, who's also, apologies, note for our General Manager Evelisa today. Robin's representing the GM as well. She is going to introduce item 4. Following that, I'm going to then invite our two submitters to then come to the table. Robin?
Good morning, councillors. So this morning's speed limit report deals with 5 distinct areas, and just to try and make things a little easier, we'll work our way through those areas. On page 25 of which is attachment 1 in the report, you will find those areas clearly marked. So areas 1 and 2 are Huntington and St James, and today we have some submitters talking to those areas. So we'll work through those after the submitters have been heard, and then we will work through the following 3, which is Rotokauri, Christabel and Rocky Road. So happy now to move to presenters.
Okay, can I first of all invite Evelyn and Aiken to join us, please.
Here?
Yes, that's fine. And as per our standing orders and process, you have 5 minutes. Give us some leeway, if you would, to take questions. Thank you. We're in your hands.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for hearing me, and I wish to express my thanks to the staff who provided me with quite a lot of information in response to requests. Ethan Young was really helpful. The proposal that was circulated to the residents identified the areas that it was headed up proposed safer speed areas. The information provided by Ethan indicates that the council intends to spend $660,000 on the speed areas in St James and Huntington, which, given our straitened financial circumstances, I thought was a little excessive. The design of the streets in Huntington and St James is such that traffic does not travel at speed, and it is really comfortable for cycling on. And as a cyclist who cycled there for many years, it's space I'm really familiar with. And one of the questions I asked Ethan was, if we're looking to make it safer, what accidents have there been? And over a 10-year period in Huntington, There have been 15 crashes, 3 of which have included injuries. One of those was in a driveway, was a medical incident. One of them was in a cul-de-sac in the same street as the driveway that had a child on a skateboard. And the third was an attempted suicide. Changing the speed limit is not going to affect any of those injury-related incidents. By contrast, for the same period, Wairiri Drive, the junction between Huntington and Wairiri Drive had 17 accidents in that period, 8 of which had injuries. There have been changes to the road since then, and the number of accidents since then has diminished, but it is still a very difficult and unpleasant area to drive through. The traffic calming changes that are proposed for the pavements include 2 platforms, one at each end of Huntington Drive as they interact with Wairiri, and a series of platforms through the proposed cycleway from Stoneleigh to Thomas Road. The Stoneleigh area, I struggle to think that I would have seen more than 5 cars moving on that road in 10 years. So why put traffic calming measures in there? There are about 4 proposed. And as an area to cycle through, it's really straightforward and easy. The 2 that are proposed for Huntington Drive, they'll make cycling really easy, and I think it will make it more dangerous, because certainly approaching the East Huntington Junction, you've got traffic turning right from Wairiri Drive, you've got traffic turning left from Wairiri Drive, and traffic turning out. And the left stuff is really hard to see if you're cycling along there, and you have to stop and look. And if we've got an easy pavement going across there, people will not stop and look if they're not familiar that that is a dangerous corner. So I think it's a waste of money, and it's not going to achieve any greater safety. Your return on investment is going to be zip. And I think that if you're going to spend money in our area, there are higher priorities. And I'm sure you've got higher priorities on your list of places to spend money. I would ask one thing though, when you put traffic calming measures in, there are generally chicanes, wide bars that are put across footpaths when cyclists are coming out into the street. Please put them further apart because they're bloody difficult to get through.
Right. Thank you very much. Have questions? Councillor Pascoe.
Thanks, and thanks, Anne, for coming in and presenting this morning. I notice in Mr Webb, who is another resident, Hugh Webb, has put in a written submission, and he comments about Darjon having become a little bit of a rat run for cars because of, you know, at certain times of the day there's a build-up of traffic out on Wairiri with the single lane on both sides. Have you noticed that as being a...
Darjon's at the other end from us,
yeah,
so
but
I don't see that very much.
So you don't see cars coming into Darjon and exiting out through the through Huntington and travelling through there at some speed?
I don't know. No. And I've never seen... I've never seen traffic behaving in a way in Darjon that caused me concern.
Okay. Thank you. That's all the question I had.
Councillor Van Oosten.
Thanks, Anne, for your insight as a resident in the area. It's always really good to have an understanding from people who are working and living in those spaces and navigating them all the time. Have you seen the wider plan for the cycling pathway? I know that it wasn't on that flyer. Was it available to you?
I read the council agenda.
Oh, okay. And that's where you saw that? You weren't aware of it prior to making your submission or
No,
in your discussions with Ethan?
I got a bunch of information from Ethan in response to specific questions.
Okay,
And
yeah.
the wider plan was not one of the specific questions, so I didn't see the blue dots on the map until I was looking at it yesterday.
Does that change in any way your thinking about the raised platforms and the use of that road as a cycling bypass from Gordonton at all?
I think that using the Stoneleigh through to Thomas Road is great as a cycling path. I don't think that there's a need for the traffic calming measures in it, that's all.
Yeah, okay.
I've ridden down Gordonton Road a lot in the past. I don't do it anymore. It's just too dangerous.
It feels very unsafe,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
yeah,
And may I just say thanks for talking about those chicanes. I know at that roundabout particularly, at Gordonton and Wairere, that it's really tricky to get through those and not end up in the garden.
The best chicanes are the ones at Hamilton Gardens going under Cobham Drive to Sillery Street. They're really good.
Yes, I'm very familiar with those too. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you for your submission. I'm just interested in, you've said that you feel safe biking in the area which has been, which is going to be this future bike connection. But in terms of younger children, do you think that there are benefits to, putting in further safety measures for people who are more vulnerable and not so experienced in terms of, riding a bike in the area and having those slower speeds?
That's the concern I've got about the raised platform at Huntington junction with Wairere is primarily about younger riders. At the moment, you have to get off and stop and have a look. If there's a raised platform there that makes it really smooth to just go from the footpath across the road, I am concerned that they will be less cautious about stopping and getting off and looking at the traffic that is coming from behind them at some speed. And hence my concern for it. It'll make it much smoother riding, but I don't think it'll be safer.
Okay, thank you. And beyond that, really your main concern is just the cost of these changes, and that you'd prefer that money goes towards making it easier to get onto Wairere Drive. Is that just a good summary of your concerns?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other further questions? Thank you. If there's no further questions, thank you for that and for your submission. I now invite Mr. Richard Still to come to the committee, please.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Hearings and Engagement Committee. My name is Richard Still. I'm a resident of Huntington, and I'd like to talk about something that affects a lot of people that live in Huntington, entry and exit. So I see the proposals that you have put forward, I see as ticking the soft box with little general safety improvements to our main routes, i.e. Wairere Huntington Drive interface, and it's the west end of Wairere. Driver behaviour is difficult to change. Bad driving habits become ingrained, the norm. Hokonui roundabout crash statistics detail the damage created by motorists who have little regard for others or themselves. Hokonui Wairere roundabout is like a slingshot for motorists heading east downhill along Wairere Drive. Note the 50 to 80k speed change is located approximately 150 metres before West Huntington Slip Road turnoff. Wairere Drive, West Huntington Drive junction is a health and safety risk with potential serious injury the outcome. If a health and safety audit was done on the Huntington Junction, it would be closed. This is not an option. Those familiar with such audits are aware that elimination is the preferred option to remove risk. Alternatively, control the risk. Left turn slip road was shortened in 2019, hence following vehicles closer to turning vehicles into Huntington Drive and crossover to the vehicle lay-by, that is, that go across Wairere into the lay-by. Many close calls I have observed, which really concerns me, and that's the reason I'm here. The East Huntington Slip Road is the same length as the original West Huntington Slip Road and is perfectly manageable by everybody. I've drove there last night to confirm it. Introducing the cyclist passage bridge at entry points into West Huntington will slow traffic further with potential double up and hence fast traffic behind having to take evasive action. This could be a disaster waiting to happen. Therefore, like Gordonton Road, reduce speed, they've gone from 80 kilometres an hour to 60, and or introduce control measures such as traffic lights, speed bumps, roundabout, flashing speed signs, that's those that monitor your speed, and if you're above the speed, they flash up, or improved and or repositioned static signage, etc. And there's a number of ways we can do it, or you can do it. Firstly, as a minimum, move both 80 kilometre sign and 50 kilometre signs east of their current positions. So they move east towards Stoneleigh. And that would actually then put the 50 kilometre speed zone away from the crossing from Huntington West. That will keep the traffic slow but moving and will not interfere with anything. Shifting 80 that position there is not going to change the outcomes at the far end of Wairere. I have witnessed on several occasions one vehicle parked in vehicle lay-by and another sneaking in with tail protruding into traffic flow. Again, some close calls, and under the Health and Safety Act, that would be a near miss. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Pascoe first.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks, Richard, for your presentation and certainly some detail around the Wairere and intersections with Huntington. Were you aware in recent years there was a resident-led consultation process between councillors and residents on trying to find better safety outcomes for the intersection east and west from Huntington into Wairere Drive?
Firstly, no, I was not. To be really honest, a couple of years ago I was working full-time. So.
Okay, no, I just wanted, because I'm interested, and I don't want to cut my question off, but I was interested to see, the feedback, given that we had maintained contact with the resident group, given the changes that were made, particularly to the Huntington Wairere West intersection. The West intersection,
yes, yeah.
Which was the one that created the difficulty with Hokonui, with the Hokonui intersection.
Okay, I'll talk about.
No, that's okay. I just wondered if you were aware of that.
If I could talk about those two separately, please.
Yep, sure.
The design of the Huntington East intersection is totally different than the Huntington West.
Yep, I'm aware of that.
It's far more manageable from a driver perspective. It's also easier for the oncoming traffic. As I said in my original presentation, I talk about the roundabout as being a slingshot for motorists, and it really is. I don't know who lives, these members or the council members that live there, but you need to live there and experience it to modification to the West Huntington interface, the junction, I've always said was a dog's breakfast, and nothing's changed. I won't go into the details,
Okay.
but it does not work. And the close calls I've seen, the cars being taken up the backside, excuse my expression, or as I said, the rear of the car is sitting on the roadway. We're lucky we haven't had more accidents. And it's the diligence of some of the drivers that has kept those low. It could be redone, that Huntington West, and that's what I'm here talking about.
Okay, thank you for that.
I'm not worried about the Cycle Way, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm more worried about that.
Yeah, okay.
Because it has more impact on people.
Would you like me to put you in contact with the resident group or the people who formed the resident group so that you could discuss your concerns with them and see whether or not there's a need to revisit what was done? And I think it was done 2 or 3 years ago, Robin, just to see whether or not we need to sit down again and see where the successes have been and where the challenges still are.
And obviously that can be taken up in a minute with Robin.
Yep.
Yes, certainly.
There has to be something done, and I'm more than happy to work with them, but we need to do something. I don't want a serious injury there.
Yep.
And I
Nor do we.
stated
Nor do we.
about the health and safety risk of that junction. I mean, we're getting more and more cars. You've got Green Hill down the road that's going to have potentially 2,000 properties. That's 4,000 cars.
Yep.
Seriously. We got the Eastern Arterial that's going to come in. It's going to be the preferred route of choice coming off the arterial. So we're going to get bigger vehicles coming through. We're going to get trucks coming through. I don't want to talk about the Hokonui School. I just don't want to talk about that. That's world famous in Hamilton, that is.
I do share your concerns. I think we have discussed around this table, some of the concerns on the 2 intersections, the one at Greenhill and the one at Hokonui and what's in between. So it is very much an approach that I think Council has done in the last few years, but certainly if it's still of concern, I think it needs to be revisited.
Thank you.
And the other thing, and I know all the members here are well aware of it. I mean, Anne and I have lived there for 13 years, and we've seen the growth. In fact, it was a dead end, Wairere Drive,
Yep.
then. Yep. We've seen the growth in the city, and it's not going to stop. All the Aucklanders are coming down here. I mean, we can see it. We see it in the small businesses. We see it in the light industry, and you understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah, sure.
It's not going to reduce, it's going to get worse.
Thank you. I now have
Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks, Richard, for your submission. Just to clarify 2 aspects on that west intersection of the Huntington piece. How they've reduced that slip lane with all those funny cones, does that exacerbate it as well, in your opinion, that you can't actually turn left until the last minute and people duck in?
The cones.
Or
There's
those
a concrete,
sticks,
there's a concrete,
those sticks, those
oh,
hit sticks, whatever they're called.
there's a whole lot of, that big lump of concrete they stuck in that junction, they should throw it out. It's a narrow, look, I've got a motorhome and it's a squeeze to get through there. I don't know how trucks get through, and we've got buses to deal with at the junction as well.
And the other thing was just regarding your sort of slingshot roundabout. If there was a speed sign of, say, 60k right at the start of that, would that help to stop people hitting the accelerator at that point? You think that would help?
I could say yes and I could say no. I mean, I'm not a roading engineer, but I've done a bit of engineering in my time. And there are, if we have it, Hokonui's 50, there's from Wairere towards the river, it's 80 to 50. And then we go 50 to 80. All I'm asking is to move the 80 further east along Wairere Drive. That will reduce the speed going to that junction. Also, and I've said it, we need to look at that slip road if we're going to put this passive bridge that Anne spoke of. Yes, they will. They'll just ride straight across it. I've been a cyclist for 30 years. and I cycle on the roads, I will not go on Wairere Drive anymore. I'm a road cyclist. It's a death wish going on there, unless I go at 6 in the morning, but hey. There's no quick solution on, I could say, make it 60, is that right? Is 50 right? But coming out of Hokonui, let's leave it at 50. Put 50 there, 50 there, 50 from there, leave it 50 till we get past that turn off.
Any further questions? No, you'll see I'm just darting
No.
across to the screen here with our
Thank you,
Zoom
Martin.
members as well.
Yeah.
Look, thank you very much for your submission, and certainly appreciate the time and effort that you've taken. Thank you. I now want to invite Robin to come and join us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And if you can now just carry on with this item.
Yes, okay. So just to focus, continue to focus on the Huntington and St James areas. So as per the report, this project came out of the Gordonton Road work that we did in the business case, and looking to provide a safe alternate for people wanting to cycle and walk, actually, because there's quite a number of people that do that. So there's a bridge being installed any time now that will go across the little gully between the Huntington and the St James areas, and then this is about creating a path. At the early stage of developing up this proposal, the safer speed areas, we looked at our speed management plan, which looks at creating safer speed areas and not just dealing with individual streets, and ultimately rolling out 40 Ks on all local residential streets. At the time of providing the information through to the submitters, we believed that we were going to need to do some physical works in both the Huntington area and in the St James area to deal with speed, in addition to the work that was proposed for the cycle routes. On, I'll just get the right page. Attachment 6, which is page 41, I believe, of the report.
41, page 41.
41?
Yep.
Yes. That shows the proposed treatments in the area. We've looked at the speed surveys in the area, and we've also taken on board the feedback from residents. So the Huntington residents, we had a variety of responses, a strong number against the proposal, and a lot of the reasons were really that they wanted to see the funding spent instead on dealing with the Gordonton, the Wairere Huntington sort of area. Some believe the speeds are good because of the very curvilinear nature of the area, and others noted that they found it very dangerous in the area. So I think it probably depends on where you live and where you're actually commuting, walking, that sort of thing, based on experience. As a result of that feedback, we're now no longer proposing to do any specific speed management work within the Huntington area. We have some through the Stoneleigh and Darjong area to support the proposed cycle route. The information from St James indicated that the speeds were quite a lot higher in that area, and so we have some localised improvements planned there. They are tied in with where we've got either bus routes and we've got bus stops, so people getting on and off crossing the road for buses, or for the one at the top of the page, the link through to the Rototuna Primary. So there's a quite a neat walkway system on page 41.
41, okay, sorry. Yeah.
I'm happy to answer off some of the questions and points raised by the submitters if you'd like.
Can you just, first of all, we had the public consultation.
Yes.
And I also want to note and receive formally Hugh Leslie Webb's submission, which we've obviously all read as well. Can you just give us a summary broadly of the feedback as a result of that consultation? I think that would just, so I've got a context of local residents' feelings.
Yes, so we did, the flyer was delivered by hand by our team, and that we do it by hand because while the New Zealand Post system kind of works, we get a lot of bounce backs, and this is one way of guaranteeing that we actually make sure everyone has received it. And we also mail to anyone who's not a resident, so a property owner but not actually resident in the area. And the submissions that we've got back, a summary of that is on page 19 of the report. So we've tried to divide the information up according to the two areas. For those that didn't support it, it was, as I sort of outlined earlier, small number of crashes, the speeds weren't an issue, the general area was operating okay, and there were other locations I'd like to see the money spent, versus those who were in support who thought there were high speeds in the area and thought that actually it would fit with what's there and would help with people walking and cycling. So I guess it's like all things in life, there's always two sides to the story, and it probably depends where you are. For the St James area, there was a more even sort of response, but fairly similar issues. Someone noted that there were no cyclists in the area, and I guess that is reflective of the fact at the moment they can't actually get between St James and Huntington, but the bridge that's proposed will address that. So on balance, staff have tried to come up with a proposal whereby we do proceed with a lower speed limit, but we're not doing as much physical works, particularly in the Huntington area. We have proposed to do treatments at Huntington Wairere, both the eastern and the western end. That's just being open and honest about future works. With the changes that are due to come through legislation with the Accessible Streets package, it's going to change the priority given for pedestrians and cyclists crossing roads, whereby vehicles will be required to stop for them. So we wouldn't be looking at implementing that work until that change has come through. Those changes were proposed at the beginning of this year, and Council did a submission on that. Things have gone a little slower than was planned. They were intending to have the sort of final cabinet papers and that out probably in the last 2 months, but obviously with COVID, that's basically taken up time in the House for working through rules changes and those sorts of things, and then we had the delay with elections. So we're now expecting that to come out early in the new year. So that's just signalling some proposed works that we would look at, and that would be to strengthen the cycling network, recognising the Wairere Drive is a really well used cycling and walking network through there. Just answering off some of the other issues that have been raised with the chicanes and barriers. We have got a summer student coming in, and we're doing an audit of all of those barriers throughout the city. We have been dealing with, on a case-by-case basis, dealing with the ones that are creating issues. And we've also been doing some work with Bike Waikato and various members of community to actually work out the best spacing and layout. So we recently had a member of the public who rides a trike, who has some physical difficulties, actually help us to actually trial it and work out what the best solution is. So we think we've just about got that nut cracked. It's a really difficult balance between making it easy and safe for cyclists to get through, but also trying to manage speeds, because we have had one unfortunate incident where we had a cyclist going really fast and hit a pedestrian, which resulted in the death of the pedestrian. So that's sort of the balancing game that we're playing. But as I said, we've got an audit planned, and then we'll progressively roll that out. But we're happy to deal with a case-by-case basis if anyone raises those. With regard to the Huntington Wairere intersections, we did do a lot of work back in 2017 and 18. We had a trial in place for quite some time, trialling different treatments in that area, and we brought in international experts who we're experienced and particularly studying those sorts of layouts, and progressively did some minor changes, including removing the right turn in to Huntington West, just to reduce the number of movements that were happening there. That work was then subsequently formalised by the installation of concrete and rocks. That intersection was initially the same as Huntington East, but has been since treated and looks different. Huntington East, even though it's the same layout, has a lot less people actually turning left into it. It's one that we're keeping an eye on. It's one that we looked at as part of the work, but at the moment it's not exhibiting the same crash issues, and so that's why we haven't gone in and treated that one. Part of the issue for the Huntington West and the reason why we reduced that slip was that when cars were turning into that lengthy left slip, the cars who were turning out of Huntington were actually not spotting a car coming through, and that were it was a shadowing effect, and that was the crash that we were dealing with. As part of the final report that we did on that, we recognised that we can only do short-term solutions there. The intersection is too close to put traffic signals at. And the recommendation that was put to council was that we investigate further putting a major roundabout at Huntington East, which is more sort of central along that route, along with four-laning. That work is tentatively included in the 10-year plan that councillors have been working through over the last few weeks, but it is sitting out further. I think it commences about year 6 or 7. And that recognises that in order to put an appropriate roundabout in there, you're actually going to have to look at some land purchase, and that would be an appropriate time to also look at four-laning at least the section from that new intersection through to the Gordonton big roundabout.
So that's from Gordonton through
to at least to the Huntington East intersection,
Right.
but potentially through all the way to Hokanui.
so basically, so that's an
Yes.
LTP.
And with the installation of a roundabout at Huntington East, the proposal would be then to change Huntington West to a left in, left out,
Right,
to reduce that conflict.
okay.
So that's the sort of the long-term plan for that.
So I'm going to take, first of all, questions. First of all, I've got Councillor Hamilton, then I have Councillor Thompson. Councillor Hamilton, and then Councillor Pascoe.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Robin. That was really helpful. Just kind of understanding some of the context there, as particularly that left-hand slip lane. Just interested in your commentary or thoughts on Richard's proposal around either maintaining that 50k through or just even dropping that speed zone coming out of that roundabout.
That was something that was also looked at quite closely at the time of doing the changes to the left slip. The reality is that the Wairere Drive environment, the way it's built and designed and built, the way it feels and operates is for high speed. My concern is that I can move a sign easily, but moving signs, installing signs does not actually manage speeds, and that we need to do some physical works if we want to really get the speeds down there. So I would prefer that the residents who choose to pull right out of Huntington West, my first preference is that they don't, that they actually go down to Huntington East and use the roundabout. That was my first preference, and I know that that takes a little longer. If they want to turn right, I would rather that they are looking at a gap in the traffic, expecting that traffic's coming towards them at 80 k's, and they're choosing a safe gap. If I move that 50k sign and they pull out expecting that people are doing 50, and I haven't managed to lower the speeds, they're likely to get hit by somebody going faster. So I would rather that they make their choice on pulling out and choosing a gap, expecting people coming at them at 80 k's. If they're going a bit slower, that's great, they'll be safe. But the reverse is likely to end up in more crashes.
Thanks. And just on that, you mentioned that potential new roundabout. I don't want to get too much into the detail, but What's the sort of indicative cost? I mean, you talk about purchasing land, that's some of Hamilton's premium priced property, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
And also, so I'd be interested in indicative costs, but also when you talk about four laning, would that then apply to the whole Huntington piece right through to that Wairiri Hukanui roundabout?
Yes, so at the time of doing the report, which was probably about 2017, we had an indicative estimate in the order of 8 million for the roundabout. We're lucky that there's an underpass right in that area already, so we didn't have to deal with that. You would then look at least, I think, four laning the section from that intersection through to the big Gordonton Darjong intersection would be the minimum that you would deal with, because you're doing all that sort of earthworks to accommodate it. The roundabout design was such that we were building it for being a two-lane circulating, so expecting long-term that Wairau Drive would be four-laned. So that would be your minimum.
Yeah.
You could then consider taking it further west all the way through to Huntington at the same time.
Okay, and just when you talk 8 million, in terms of doing a Chris Allen, is that the gross or net factoring in or out NZTA funding?
So that would be the gross. We'd have to work through getting subsidy, and then depending on your length of four laning, that would be extra over that cost as well.
Okay, thank you.
Right, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Thanks, Robin. You've answered a lot of my questions already, but one I had was in regard to the leaflet drop and then the response back from residents. I'm just wondering, is there a risk that people who generally supported the changes or were kind of neutral on them just went, yeah, okay, and were too busy to reply or whatever, and you then had people who were strongly against them more likely to respond, and we ended up, I'm just worried that with these we may end up with a bit of a bias in terms of negative responses, and then you've got people who, you know, might have kids in the area who want to walk or bike to school or that kind of thing, who are going to then miss out on those safety changes, and when there may have been a positive reception to them. So I'm just wondering, yeah, what are your thoughts on that potential risk of a negative bias, and what could we do to kind of alternative ways to engage with communities to get maybe randomised responses or something?
I guess this is always one of the risks that we play when we're doing public consultation, and that is the reality of the world we live in, unfortunately. And I do believe that there are a large number of people who just think, yeah, it makes sense, and so I don't need to tell anyone that. So we do our best to certainly encourage people to submit, and I know that Councillor Mark had a lot of conversations with residents in St James, for example, and I guess that's my one plea that I always say to people, and it doesn't matter whether you're for or against, but it's really great to get that feedback so that it actually helps us with our decision making. As far as, I guess, missing out, the staff proposal is still to proceed with the safer speed areas and completely in both areas, and to lower the speed limit to 40k. While we're reducing the amount of work in the Huntington area, we're still trying to provide the support, and it's not just about speed, it's trying to get people safely across the road at key locations, so it's linking up walkways and those sorts of things. There's nothing stopping us coming back at some time in the future and looking at some of those proposals that we had in the Huntington area, if people come back to us and say, actually, we didn't say anything at the time, but we now would like something to be put in. So there's always that opportunity in the future to come back and put a little bit more in.
Okay. Thank you. Would it be possible to have it just offline maybe, but to look at some different ways that we could be engaging with these communities to see if we can get a good sample of voices within the areas. Is that something we could explore potentially?
Yes, we're always happy to. I guess it's just about trying to find the right balance with how much we pay on consultations. So.
Yeah, a conversation I'm having, Robin probably, I alluded to with Robin and Eva Lisa was to have some kind of drop in that we kind of just had a bit of a chat about what was coming in front of us in 2021. That doesn't interfere with this process in terms of open mind, but it would really be good, I think, for this committee and members, interested members, to have this kind of visuality of particularly around the safer speeds and obviously, as we've discussed one or two, around we have a safer speed of 40, but what extra retrofits are required in those areas where you've just put up the sign and nothing else, and the behaviours haven't necessarily changed. So I'll be working as chair with Robin and Eva Lisa perhaps for a kind of a drop in on that. Now the next person in line is Councillor Pascoe and then Councillor Van Oosten.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Robin, for the report and the detail in there. I'm looking at Fig 1 on page 19, where you've got the orange showing the proposed, in particular, Huntington. Without going through the proposed staff motion, what changes are being suggested, given the feedback to lower the speeds in Huntington? Is it essentially going to stay the same as Fig 1, or is there another chart somewhere which details where the lower speeds in Huntington are proposed?
So for speed, I'm not proposing any change to the streets that we lower the speed on.
Okay.
In our early thinking for planning the physical works to support that, we were looking at quite a few opportunities within the Huntington area to put additional race safety platforms. And as a result of the feedback, we are not recommending going ahead with any of the physical works, but no change to the scope of the speed limit change as proposed.
So do you think that's wise? Not wise, perhaps the wrong word, but given that 3/4 of the submitters are opposed to those lower speed changes, 21 to 7, that we're actually going ahead when the residents those who submitted have indicated to us that they are against the lower speeds?
Most of the submitters who were against the lower speeds were because of the money that was proposed to be spent in there, and said that they didn't support the lower speed because there was going to be costs involved and that there were better locations to spend the money. The the speed management plan recommends treating areas, and so that's what staff have recommended at this stage.
So without the raised platforms, is it still going to cost $660,000? No.
No. So the cost will be significantly less because we're only proposing for the speed management side of things, we're only proposing the 3 treatments in St James now.
Okay.
And the savings that we've made from this work will mean that we can have a look at other areas within the city to look at supporting more safer speed areas in other locations.
Right, okay, that's great. I'm just, through you, Chair, I continue to voice this concern, but I would like to see our reports showing the actual costs. You know, we talk about it being funded out of existing budgets, and I know when I first came on council, that was the way that most of the reports indicated, but I would like to see in our reports, you know, some idea of what the cost is. I know that Anne mentioned 660,000. Robin's now saying it's going to be significantly less. But, you know, maybe the report should be telling us what the cost is.
I think, and there speaks obviously our Chair of Finance, and that's acknowledged, absolutely, but a supplementary question without interrupting his flow. What is the actual rough estimate cost now?
For the speed management, it'll be in the order of 350,000.
350.
Oh, so it's still pretty high, isn't it? I mean, I'm thinking of it probably incorrectly, but I'm thinking of it, you know, some signs and some painting on the roads.
Oh, sorry,
and-
that answer was to treat both Huntington and St James.
and St
Sorry.
James, yeah.
Yes, so for
Okay.
Huntington, yes, it will be just signs for Huntington.
And the
So that-
660,000 was just for Huntington?
No,
Or
that-
it was for
that-
both
that
areas?
was for both areas
Okay,
as well.
okay.
So this area specifically would be, if it's 350 for both, just roughly what?
So it'll only be signage, so it might be in the order of $3,000 or $4,000 to deal with signage.
How much?
3,000 or 4,000.
Okay, so I mean, I think,
Yep.
and I'm
Yep.
not, I'm saying this deliberately and not in any sleight of hand. Councillor Pascoe's role as Chair of Finance, because I think that is he does ask a very relevant question just in terms of
It's more
the
than
choices, albeit we need to hear the safety aspects, but of course the financial aspects. Any further questions?
Yeah, I have got,
Yes.
sorry, I have got some more questions, if you will indulge me, Chair. Mr Webb mentions about the Serpentine Road, you know, which creates some of these little rat runs. And I know I've got one in my area, which is Tahuia Drive, which is pretty much designed the same way as Huntington Road is, and I know cars stop around there. Have we got some ability to influence developers? And I know that this is slightly outside of this report to, address that style. I know it gets more houses in the street or more sections, but have we got some influence in terms of being able to design those roads a little better so we don't create the opportunity for those types of roads that become, little racetracks?
A limited amount. I think that the big problem that we had, and this area is probably not so bad as some, but the big problem that we were having with this sort of roading layout was really for walking and cycling. And it was about the fact that to get anywhere, you had to meander forever, and it took, it was a long distance. So the district plan has focused more on trying to ensure that there's some good alternate shorter networks for walking and cycling, which is where we see an increased number of walkways and that sort of thing coming through with our developments. I guess the days of the old Hamilton East, beautiful grid layouts are long gone.
Sadly.
And they had their advantages, and they also had their disadvantages, because the long straight roads also have high speeds. So I think it's about understanding that some of these roads will be used as alternate routes, and that's okay as long as people are doing that safely and courteously. And it's trying to create the right environment to sort of reinforce that. Ultimately, we would like right traffic on the right roads, which means that we're wanting people to stick to those arterials and only getting on into the sort of collectors when they're starting to actually move into the residential is what we ultimately aim for.
Okay, and thank you, Chair. And one final question, Robin. You'll be aware that myself and the late Philip Young worked with council staff and with the community in terms of the entrances and exits in and out of Huntington. Is that group still around there? Because they were a very sensible group who came up with some, who were prepared to work with council in terms of finding solutions, and it appears from Richard's submission that there may still be some concern in the area that the exits and entrances from Huntington into Waiwere Drive are still challenging. Is there an opportunity to reignite that group with a view that, we could see what's working in terms of the last outcome and what isn't?
So I'm not aware that the group per se is still active. A lot of the submissions are names that I recognise from working with that group. So I think that they're still, actively interested, and they were a lot of the submissions against the work, and it was primarily because there was money being spent within Huntington, and they really wanted to see it spent on Waiwere Drive, Huntington. So it is one that we're keeping an eye on, and the intersection has improved really well, has operated really well from a crash stats, but I appreciate that crash stats are only when things go wrong. And we do continue to have the near hits, we did a lot of work with that community, encouraging them to only have one vehicle turning, sitting in the central area, turning right at a time. So there's possibly opportunities to reinforce that and to encourage actually perhaps considering going down to the eastern exit and going out that way.
Yeah, and I'm aware that a number of residents who I know there actually do that from both east and west intersections, will drive all the way down to Gordonton Road roundabout and do the loop that way, just in terms of preserving that safety issue. Yep. Thank you. Thanks, Robin. Thanks,
Councillor Van Heusden.
Thanks, Robin. Most of those questions, in my mind, have been answered with that. I live in a 40k residential area, and the signs at the top of the road, and maybe one or two in some other places, but it's not very visible anywhere else. Can you tell me about what kind of treatment you have talked about signage that you'll put up? Once you're in the midst, how are residents going to absolutely know that this is 40 k's now? Because ultimately we're wanting to change behaviours, and I note in your report though that the average speeds aren't higher than 50 in any of those spaces. So yeah, can you give me some understanding?
Yes, so it is, I guess it's an ongoing piece of work that we've been doing and learning. And initially our focus was very much on the entrance into those areas. What we've progressively been doing is we've found that the 40k marking on the road really useful, a very simple and easy sort of method of just reminding people while they're moving through those areas. So for any requests that we have for people concerned that the speeds are not staying down, or that they do get people going through a bit quick, we look at opportunities for popping that 40k marking on the road within the area. So that's a really good reminder, because I think when you get up in the morning and leave, that's perhaps when you need that reminder to switch on to the 40k.
Yeah, especially if you spent the extra 5 minutes in bed. So you'll be painting 40s on the roadway?
Yeah, so we look at that as part of our treatment, and in the Huntington area, for example, the speeds are actually down around the 41, so they're actually quite good. In the St James area, we'll be putting in the physical works, and then we'll monitor. And we've been monitoring all of the safer speed areas that we've put in over the last almost 10 years now. We do go back every now and then and actually do another speed survey just to see how things are behaving. And then we've also got the speed trailers that we can pop out into these areas, and that records the speed that people are doing and reminds people that it's 40k in the area.
Yeah, it's quite a large.
It is.
Does it flash, or it monitors the speed and brings up the number?
It depends how fast you're going. So rather than encouraging people to see how big a number they can get, we have a threshold basically that if they're going more than probably about 10 k's over the speed limit, then it actually just says slow down, just so we don't have people playing with it.
And you don't get a thumbs up if you're doing good?
We haven't had that yet, but yeah, there's certainly opportunity.
So my last question, with your indulgence, Chair, is with regard to the raised platforms that we see on page 41 along Wairere Drive, the blue dots. I've ridden those areas, and can cheer loudly at the proposal to do that. Either Anne or Richard mentioned the worry of people turning left into both of those roadways, and a pedestrian being unaware of it. I don't have a rear vision mirror on my bike, so I'm not always aware of what's behind me. How do you see that working?
So that, I think, as I said earlier, is a piece of work. It's a heads up that that's something we're looking at. We're not intending to roll it out right now, and that will be part of a response to that regulatory, Accessible Streets regulatory package. And that is, I think we're going to have to look carefully at that as to what signage there is for the pedestrians and cyclists, just to remind them to check. But there will be a national campaign delivered around the need for turning traffic to give way to pedestrians and cyclists. And we'd obviously want to augment that locally as well. So I agree that that's an issue, and that's something that we're going to have to look at carefully for the whole city when that change, if that change comes through. You know, the general indication is that it is a change that will happen. Just when and what support goes with that is something that's going to have to be worked on.
Yeah, again, a big cheer from me. I know from travelling to Holland to see family that the hierarchy there is that cyclists and pedestrians have the right of way. And to see that behaviour change in our drivers would be remarkable. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Before Councillor Thompson, a quick question in terms of longer term, and I'm wondering if we could perhaps, whether it's via this committee or a note that we have Chair of Infrastructure and also the Deputy Chair of Infrastructure present at this meeting, but you know, the sort of a big sort of an overview, because what I'm hearing is the bigger picture is, for example, the 4-laning issue. When the expressway is operational down that side of the city, so my brain said if you live in Tamahiri, Cambridge, even possibly parts of Te Amutu, I'm not sure, and you want to access the Te Rapa industrial area, then you'll obviously be just zooming down the expressway and coming, then using the Northern Wairere Drive to access that area. What traffic modelling are we doing? Because I suspect when the expressway is done there, probably that will mean a lot of change of traffic patterns, will it not?
Potentially it will, but looking at we've done some work just looking at where traffic comes from on a bridge by bridge basis, and there's already quite a clear usage of Wairere Drive to get up and use the upper bridge. So probably the likely change that we're going to see is actually a reduction in traffic on Wairere Drive as it moves across to the expressway. What that does mean is that roundabout will have a different traffic flow coming in from Pardoa Boulevard when it opens to what's happening now. There has been traffic modelling done, but I'm sure that other committee members who are not present today will give their opinion on modelling. At the end of the day, the human being is really hard to model, and people it's almost like water. They find the path of least resistance and work their way through. So the model has done some work, and really until it's open and operational, we really don't know how good the model is, unfortunately.
Right. Okay, quick sup from Councillor Thompson, then Deputy Chair Wilson. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Robin, I just wanted to follow up on the chicanes issue. It's fantastic to hear that we're doing an audit, because I've had huge amount of complaints around them. But can you please confirm the funding to actually do the physical works to make those remediations? Where would that be included?
So we just fit that sort of work into our low cost, low risk safety program currently. Moving forward, recognising that Waka Kotahi are separating out the low cost, low risk program, we've got one proposed for walking and cycling, and that would be where we pick that sort of thing up. It's not large dollars, it's just a matter of working through the issues and trying to prioritise them.
Okay, and that's would currently be able to fit within upcoming LTP funded proposals.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Chair Wilson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Martin. Robin, thank you for all the information. Maybe you could, I'm having difficulty finding the overall quantum that will need to be spent to enable the reduction of 40Ks in all the areas stipulated in this particular motion. I know there's been a lot of discussion regarding Huntington and I think St James, where it was 600,000. Could you point to me where in the report it gives the full amount of money that's required to implement every one of these speed
So I guess that's the weakness that's been highlighted by Councillor Rob, is that we don't have a dollar figure noted in the report. When we responded to the questions from the residents in the early days, we were looking at doing speed physical works in both Huntington and St James, and for speed management that was in the order of 660,000. We are now not proposing to do any physical works for speed in the Huntington area, and have the three on page 41 have the three red dots that are proposed on those plans, and that will be in the order of 330,000. But that is a weakness in the
Thanks,
report.
Robin.
Yeah.
You've already covered that. What I'm now asking, respectfully, is the amount of money that will need to be spent to achieve all the other speed reductions and all the other. That's my first point. The second point is most council reports with recommendations all has, I think, as a base requirement, financial ramifications, and I know, as you said, that isn't there. So the fact that it isn't there, fine, maybe in the future you'll make sure that it is, but surely you have something you could tell us verbally. What are we going to spend to do this?
For speed reduction, 330,000.
And that is for every one of these streets.
Yes, because the primary work is speed signs, and that only needs to be done at the entrances to them. We don't have to put a speed limit sign on every street. And then there are the three red dots shown on the page 41, which is the raised safety platforms.
Okay, so are you saying Ashmore Court, there is no cost? Ashton Way, there is no cost?
We're not. No, the majority of the individual streets. I know there's a long list of streets shown in the schedule of the report. For the majority of the streets, they just get picked up by this greater area treatment. They don't. Each individual street does not have a specific treatment put on it. Is that answering your question?
Right, so
Sorry.
they don't even have signs?
No, they don't. Because you only need to put a speed limit sign where a speed limit changes. So when you come off, say, Wairau Drive into Huntington, for example, you would put a speed limit sign there, and then you wouldn't put any other signs until you wanted to change the speed limit. So all of those other little streets in those areas don't actually even get a sign put up. And I guess that talks to Councillor Max's question about that's fine when you're coming into an area, but what if you've started your journey from within the area, and as you move through the area, how do you get reminded that it's still 40k?
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions? Right. We go back now.
So would you like me to just talk to the remaining areas?
Yeah, if you just talk
for
to the
speed?
remaining, that would be fine.
Cool.
Yeah, because I think, as I understand it, there's the issue where, from a regulatory point of view, you know, we're obviously going to make some decisions today or not, and then obviously what this conversation has highlighted is the broader overview.
Correct.
Which is sort of, I personally think would be really useful for some kind of, and I note my good colleague Councillor Leary's in the meeting, but some sort of drop-in session, because I think, you know, and picking up some, you know, particularly stuff that's coming up in 2021, I think that will actually assist this committee in terms of us getting a grip on the some of the micro issues, and then picking up Rob's point about finance. Right, Robin.
So just for the remainder of the report, there were three other areas that we were looking at speed limit changes in. Excuse me. So Rotokauri area is basically reflecting the ongoing development that's happening out there, and as the traffic volumes grow and as the number of streets in the area, residential streets. So that's been a fairly sort of clear-cut one, and one that we're perhaps more used to more recently. Christabel Circle, Area 4, that's an area that was recently changed to be vested in Hamilton City. It already sits in amongst a 40k area, so this is basically working through the process of making sure those streets are legalised for those speed limits. And then there's one new road being built, it's called Rocky Road, hopefully it's not, but Rocky Road, which is a new subdivision that comes in off Borman Road. So that again is just more of our sort of more business as usual as new streets come into the city, getting those included on the register as well.
Any question? Councillor Van Easton?
Curiosity question with regard to Area 3, Rotukoti area. You've got the two small emerging streets identified, but the larger, longer standing one, is that already a 40k area? Just curiosity, it seemed to be missing.
So, sorry, which road are you?
So I'm thinking about Mana Drive,
Yes.
Wairua Avenue.
Yeah, so they've been through
Pukenga.
previous reports on our existing
Thank
40s. And that should have been reflected on the map, sorry.
Councillor Wilson, you have your hand up.
Sorry, Chair, that was from last time. I apologise.
No, that's fine. So we have in front of us the staff recommendation, which is receiving the report, approving the following changes to the Hamilton City bylaws. That's on page 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 9, 10. Right.
Is Rocky Road where the chocolate factory used to be?
Good point. Well done, councillor. You saw it. I hadn't spotted that correlation. Well done.
Yes, thank you. That's a significant contribution to today, Chair of Finance. All right. So,
Thinking, doesn't it?
yes. I'm in your hands. Obviously, depending on what people want to do from here, in terms of the submitters, it would be useful, I think, Robin, to go back to them and explain the exact quantum, but also to pick up the other broader issues they are raising around all the access issues, and that's why I'm really keen to have some kind of drop-in February, March next year, just to get our heads around the bigger picture. Now, that is in part infrastructure, LTP, but it's also, from a hearings point of view, a traffic hearings point of view, assists us to get the strategic, overview. Because I think obviously what the submitters have said today is, there's obviously a much, much bigger picture. I think that's what they were saying, and albeit. But I think it would be good. And also I think I do take the Chair of Finance's view as just to give us a better idea while we're driven primarily by a road safety issue in this. It is useful background information to have the kind of where the resource is allocated. And then obviously very keen with Councillor Van Easton's point and I've raised before, that what kind of quantum do we need, what other areas do need what we call retrofit, in terms of extra signage in areas just to try and reinforce those 40k areas. Right. Does someone want to move the staff recommendation as par 2? Councillor Van Easton seconded. Councillor Pascoe? Right. So Councillor Thompson seconds, all right. Move Van Easton, seconded Councillor Thompson. Right, open for discussion. Councillor Van Easton?
We go? Oh, yes, there. Look, thank you, Robin. Thank you for bringing this to the committee today, particularly the Huntington and St James area, an area that I am familiar with. My parents lived there for a period, and so I do understand the intricacies and the concerns of residents in getting in and out of that area, but I also can see it from the bigger picture view of being a way to move cyclists, pedestrians around that area really safely and taking them off that Gordonton Road area, which even our presenter Anne identified as being unsafe in a carriageway that she wasn't happy to use any longer. These do provide safer streets. I live in a 40k area and I understand the benefits for all residents in having a slower way of getting around. I know that there are some real challenges when we think about car drivers. I'm one myself, and the attitude changes when you get into a car and you shut your door. You can feel very powerful, and if you're in any kind of a hurry, you are at a risk on the road. So having slower areas, having reminders in our streets, in our residential streets, is a really good way to be able to make sure that we are holding to those numbers and making sure that we behave in a responsible way that takes into account everybody that's on the street. Constantly thinking about how our streets and the hierarchy of road users is prioritised. I welcome and look forward to 2021 when that is formalised through government. In the meantime, I think these are absolutely the right treatments for our streets, particularly in that area and others that the report talks about. Kia ora and thank you.
Second to Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. We've heard today some legitimate concerns around issues with Wairewa Drive and Huntington and the intersection there. And I just want to respond to that to say that I think councillors have heard those concerns, and there will be opportunities for us to discuss solutions to that in terms of the wider network, but that's ultimately going to be an LTP conversation, and that can't be decided on today. And with these speed changes, say in Huntington, it's not mutually exclusive. It's not either we have these 40k speed changes or we have some changes to that intersection. So I think that's important to note, because there seems to be a concern that instead of doing the 40k, putting the 40k speed sign, we should be addressing a different issue. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be addressing both. And I think it's important that we're implementing the speed management plan that we've already council's already adopted, and so this is part of that. And there has been some compromise in terms of putting in physical works in the area where residents said they didn't want that money spent. But I am really supportive of the improvements for that cycleway that will connect that area and allow people to bike off Gordonton Road on a much safer route. So that's very exciting to see. But yes, I support the changes and those issues with Wairewa and Huntington. We certainly don't want to wait for a serious accident before doing something. That's not Vision Zero. That's a reactive approach, but it's not today where we can make a decision.
Deputy Chair Wilson, then Councillor Pascoe. Deputy Chair Wilson.
Yeah, look, thanks, Chair Martin. I'll be supporting the recommendation today. I have listened carefully to the evidence, and I have a couple of comments. Although I fully support the initiative to reduce speeds in community think we all sign up to the safety argument. But we also have to acknowledge the community has to come along with us on this journey. And the community is sort of saying, well, on one hand, you're unilaterally doing these initiatives, but actually you're ignoring some of the other key safety issues we have to manage every day. And I agree with Councillor Serra's comment that they're not mutually exclusive, but it does remind us carefully how important good planning from day one is. You know, you have the idea of a high-speed road such as Waiwere Drive intersecting immediately with a community, and you go from 80, 60 to suddenly 40. It's a recipe for consequences, and I don't think we've really got our head around that issue. My only other comment is I am very frustrated, and Robin, I hope you're listening. I will not be comfortable if I don't see specific financial details in reports. I sign up totally with Councillor Rob's comments. This reference to, oh, well, it meets the budget and it is not enough detail for me. I need to understand the financial consequences, and it needs to be clear and plain. So I look forward to ensuring going forward that that is the case. That's all.
Councillor Pascoe.
Thank you, Chair, and again, Robin, thanks for all the work that you do on this and in other areas around promoting safety in our streets. It is appreciated. Look, I'm going to tie in some of the earlier comments of my colleagues. One of the things that I think one of the things that's been highlighted today is more around the safety in Waiwere Drive, and I'm heartened by the fact that some of the submitters were the same people who worked with council and with myself and Councillor Young in trying to find some safety improvements in the lead out into Waiwere Drive. So what I would like to see is perhaps the reigniting of some of those individuals in the area, because not only were they working out of their own interest, but they did have a fair bit of support of that Huntington community in terms of the outcomes that we previously achieved. So there's an opportunity here to get that group back together again and see what the issues might be, as Richard has alluded to today, and how we might best, with the community, solve those. I see problems with the Serpentine type road development, and also some of our major subdivisions around the city that have limited exits and entries, and Huntington is one of them. I see Harrowfield as being a street that I pass a couple of times each day, and I see problems developing there of one entrance and exit into a river road, which is very, very close again to the Waiwere Drive intersection. And the development that's happening there is going to result in a lot more in the way of traffic movements and cyclists and pedestrians coming in and out of that area. So look, this is a major red flag area for me. May not be a problem right at this particular time, but it's something that I think as a proactive council, we need to be ahead of it before we have some serious outcomes, or we have a group of militant residents who create an insurrection with us in terms of getting some positive outcomes. Also, I share the concern, and it's not just in this committee, with Councillor Wilson in terms of the transparency that we see on the costs of these projects. I'm seeing more and more financial comments in a lot more of the council reports now saying that this is being met from existing budgets. And I think at the moment, while all 13 of us are working hard to develop with staff a good outcome in our long-term plan, I think we need to be have a good overview, a good oversight of what projects are actually costing us. Because one project here, even though it's from an existing budget, means that something else, that money isn't available to spend in another area. And just if I can conclude, I think our presenters today were highlighting that, you know, while the money's there and it's part of a budget, it might be best spent somewhere else within that area rather than on the slowing street speeds. Thank you.
Thank you. My contribution is obviously I won't add to the previous comments, and the role of this committee is to listen to evidence, have evidence base and weigh that up and listen to our professional advice. What I will encourage, as I've alluded to before, Robin, is to debrief the submitters, and also particularly with the LTP and the bigger questions, strongly encourage them and a residents group to come back via the LTP process and refocus the whole issue. Because as I understand, there's an issue of, you know, what are safe speeds on streets that are residential, purely residential. They're not principal streets, they're arterial streets. And I live, as Maxine Van Oosten alluded to, I also live in an area of the 40k. When you get out on a principal street, then it's 50k or it's 60k. But obviously, I'm hearing from this is the particular issue of safe access and exit to this area. So welcome for that. And I also back up the Chair of Finances that we identified the kind of financial resource that is going into this particular area. But I will say that our submitters, I think, have made a very significant reminder and contribution to our debate. The other thing is, I would hope, whether it's through this committee or through infrastructure, is, you know, 6 months down the track, I would be interested in some feedback for review. In reality, how is this working? Okay, and that would be fine. I think that would be very helpful. So without further ado, do you want to have a right of reply, Councillor Van Oosten? Right. We will now move that as the staff recommendation to A and B, and then of course as per the chart on pages 6 through to page 14. Right. I think we'll do a show of hands, and then obviously that can be recorded. All those in favour will raise your hands.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you. We now move to item 5. Robin?
Thank you. So we're now moving into parking restrictions and changes to the traffic bylaw. So in general, the proposed parking restrictions are fairly much our business as usual, dealing with small locations in response to either requests from residents or where locations that staff have identified. The one that does have some more information and discussion is that of Mystery Place, which is one of the developments in Harrafield Drive. So this was an area where we did receive via Councillor Mark a request for some no stopping to be investigated. We did some consultation in the area and had some early feedback. And at that stage we had proposed to put no stopping along the full length of one site. As a result of the sort of feedback that we got, we decided to come up with a middle ground. So a second option was developed, which was to look at just some localised areas of no stopping. So basically the street is narrow enough that if somebody is parked legally, and the parking that's happening through there seems to be okay from a legal perspective, they're not parking across driveways, but if they park opposite a driveway, then the people are actually having difficulty getting out. So we've worked through that. We've had, since the writing of the report, we've had one more person feedback with a preference to option 3, which is do nothing. So currently we have 3 people in support of no stopping for the full length, option 1. We have 2 in support of some localised area of no stopping, which is option 2. And we have 2 people in support of option 3, which is do nothing. From a staff perspective, we feel that we should be doing something because we do have people having difficulty getting in and out of their driveways. We think that option 2 is a reasonable middle ground to sort of address the key problem areas without putting long lengths of no stopping in place. So at this stage, that's the staff recommendation to the committee. And I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Questions? Councillor Pascoe?
Yeah, on site in each of those properties in Mystery Drive, how many car parks, including the garage?
I don't know off the top of my head. I think there's various types of proposals in there. Some of them are more intensive developments than
Would there be any property? Would there be any properties that have been built there that would have no parking on site?
Not currently, no.
No,
That will be a possibility when the new rules come in
Yeah,
place.
I know, that's where I'm
yes,
heading, yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
but not under the current rules, no.
Okay. If I know this might be a question, Robin, that you might not be able to answer. If they've been granted resource consent to build the units and haven't built them, can they modify that to build under the, I suppose I'm jumping the gun a little bit here, but under the NPSUD, could they modify their resource consent to build on those, to build dwellings on those properties without car parking?
I really can't answer that. That's more of a
Yeah.
planning question. I would
Yeah.
suspect that the costs involved with going through that probably would
Yeah.
put them off, but I wouldn't really know because it's more of a planning issue, sorry.
Do you think it warrants further investigation? Because
I guess that if they did want to do that, the outcome that we would be dealing with is just more parking demand on the street. So I guess what we've tried to do is minimise the amount of no stopping, so that there is the ability to park on street without blocking people's access or the roundabout, the cul-de-sac ahead. So I guess if your scenario was to play through, all that would do is lead to an increased demand of parking on street, which probably means that either the do nothing or option 2, do something but limited, would still be the preferred options there.
has there been any concerns expressed by residents and owners living in, I think it's Harrowfield Drive that is the older part of the subdivision, where there is, where the street is a lot wider?
No.
Has there been any concern expressed of cars being parked there by residents living in Mystery? Is it Mystery Lane, is it?
Mystery Place.
Mystery Place.
No, not
Not at this
aware of,
stage?
no.
And they weren't consulted? It was only the Mystery?
Only Mystery at this stage, and I guess that's one of the things. If we went for option 1, which was the no stopping along completely along one side, there is a potential to push parking out onto Harrowfield.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Councillor O'Leary? Councillor Thompson? Councillor Wilson? No. Councillor Hamilton?
Thank you, Chair. Robin, just with the overall changes, do you know, I couldn't see in the report what the net loss on overall parking will be to the city's network, I guess. Do you know what that might be?
So you're talking about all the changes we're putting through? No. In a lot of cases, though, they are locations where it's not legal to park anyway.
Okay.
They are short lengths where people are basically being opportunist. So opposite intersections, within 6 metres of an intersection, For parking between driveways, you have to be able to park clear by 1 metre, so they're all legal requirements anyway. And a lot of the issues that we deal with are literally reinforcing that. We try to go down the non-regulatory path of putting in just the white hole bars, and often that will work, just to really reinforce where it is appropriate to park versus where it isn't. But in some cases, we do need to actually mark the no stopping. So things like the cul-de-sac head, for example, wouldn't be legal parking anyway, because you're going to obstruct the flow of traffic.
Okay.
So, but as for doing a count, no, we haven't.
No, thank you.
No further questions? Right, I will move that the... Sorry, Pascal.
A question on River Road, which is part of this motion, isn't it? Or am I River Road, which is a large non-stopping area on page 45? And I think the map of what you're proposing to do there is, where did I see that? No, it's nowhere near me. It's, where are we? Page, River Road, hang on, page 66.
Thank you.
Just the question is, it's a very, very long area of River Road, and it almost goes to the boundary, and I'm concluding from that you want no parking there because the parking currently is in the cycle lane.
Yes, that will be supporting the cycle lane.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Do-
So again, like, it's illegal to park in a cycle lane. So
Okay.
if you've already got a cycle lane restriction in place, then it is illegal to park there. What we've been doing throughout the city is adding yellow paint, the no stopping, to
Yep.
reinforce that, because there's a lot of people that just don't seem aware, or I guess respond better to actually seeing the yellow line to reinforce their decision making.
And look, I'm not objecting to that. My question is, are we aligning our, because this is close to the city boundary, and given that, you know, we're encouraging cyclists to use those cycle lanes, have we got an alignment with, say, in this case, Waikato District Council, in terms of them continuing some sort of cycle lane outside the city, which provides that ongoing connection for cyclists? And I know a lot of cyclists, you know, don't know that they've moved out of the city into Waikato District or Waipa or wherever it is. And I'm just, my question is really around that alignment for building those connections.
It's a really good question. The difficulty that we have really is we move from an urban type environment where we've got the curb and channel and street lighting and all of those sorts of facilities into the rural ones.
Yep.
And basically in the rural areas, there is not room to create a separate cycle lane. What we have seen, particularly by Waikato and Waipa, is an increasing amount of work being put into lower speed limits, so the likes of the 80 k's and that sort of thing, reflecting that those roads are not safe for the higher speeds, but also reflecting that you know, we do get the cyclists using those areas tend to be more cyclists who are going out doing their training rides and that sort of thing.
Yep.
And so we don't actually have a linkage per se, but there is certainly that work going on by Waikato District and Waipa to the lower limit.
Is there a definition around urbanisation and rural roads? Because if you look at both of those, south and north, there tends to be a lot of urbanisation going on right on the boundary.
Yes.
And so, you know, one could argue that along River Road, when you move out of Hamilton City into Waikato, there's very little change, and you don't sort of suddenly end up in the country.
Yes.
There's houses all out there too, which resemble the houses that are in River Road in the city.
Yes, and I guess that's an increasing problem as we're getting that development sort of on the fringes of the city. And I think K Road's a very classic one where and depending on where the boundary runs. So for K Road, parts of it, it's in the middle of the road. Sometimes it's on the Waikato district side, sometimes it's on ours. So that is an increasing problem. And I know that we've, done some work where we think that there is probably a larger community who would like to be able to walk and cycle to then get into the more traditional urban areas. Then we've looked at the temporary footpaths. So K Road has had some work, but Baverstock Road had work done previously before the upgrade coming through. And I'm aware that councillors have been talking about that as at least a mitigation until, funding or boundaries and that move such that there's the ability to go in and do the full urban upgrade.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do I have a mover for this motion as per staff recommendation?
I'll move.
Moved Deputy Chair Wilson, seconded Councillor Pascoe. Mover and seconder, any debate? If there's no debate, I will now put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Right, thank you. We now move to our final item, which is item 6, temporary road closures for the Māori All Blacks versus Pacifica 2020. Robin.
Thank you, Chair. So this one is fairly much a procedural process. Normally we work through getting the notifications out for road closures well in advance, and we don't need to bring it to council. This year's obviously been a tricky one with the COVID situation, and a lot of these international matches are being pulled together at short notice, which means that we can't go through that normal public process. So that's why we've brought to you today a request for the road closures for this event. They are the road closures that we always put in place for matches at the stadium. It basically enables us to ensure that everyone's safe moving to and from the match. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Moved Councillor Pascoe, seconded Councillor Hamilton. Question, Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, thanks, Chair Martin. Hey, Robin. Look, I've just got one question. When we do these road closures, what rights do property owners have who are captured by the closure? I mean, for example, if they have an emergency or they are suddenly required to leave their home by car or come back, do they have any rights, or do they basically lose right of access via vehicle for the duration of the road closure?
No, they certainly do still have right of access. It's a matter of having a quick chat to the... So for any road closures like this, they will be literally manned. There will be a person standing there and they can have a chat to them about getting in and out. And the main thing is they move within the closed area, that they just need to travel slowly and be aware of the fact that there will be literally people walking all over the road. But no, they're certainly not, they're not jailed into their property.
Thank you for that explanation. It's very helpful. And in our communication with those who are affected, do we explain that to them? That's the second question. And the third, if I may be cheeky, is that the case you've just explained with all of our road closures around the city?
So the consultation and engagement is done by the H3 staff, and I understand that they have regular communications throughout the year with the residents in the area. So my expectation is that that is made clear as part of that, and I'm happy to follow up on that with the H3 staff. In regard to all road closures, I think my answer is probably case-by-case basis, but normally yes. So occasionally we do get road closures where we've got physical works in place and it may not be physically possible to get people in and out of their property, but there would be an expectation that there has been some good consultation and work with those properties who are affected by it, and it may be just for one overnight or something like that while concrete cures, so that there's good work done with those people who are affected by that, such that there's an alternate location for them to park or something like that. So in general, yes, there might be the odd occasion where we can't quite fulfil that.
Thanks for that explanation, Robin. Appreciate it.
Okay, if there's no further questions, we now move to the motion. Any debate? Right, I will put the motion. All those in favour will raise your hand.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Right, thank you. Now that brings to a close this meeting of the Hearings Engagement Committee. The Hearings Engagement Committee will meet again at 11:30, for which the quorum is 7. So I now conclude this meeting and do observe the fact that the Hearings Engagement will be meeting in this room at 11:30.